So here we're going to be talking about Stephen Covey's 4-grid time management matrix. Stephen Covey, you recognize the name if you ever have heard or seen the books, the 7 Habits books. 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, 7 Habits of Highly Effective Corporations, 7 Habits of Highly Effective Teenagers, 7 Habits of Highly Effective Dogs, I have no idea. All sorts of different 7 Habits books. When Stephen Covey first came out with this, I don't know, 20 some odd years or so ago, it revolutionized how the study of time management. It wiped that 3-part system just right off the face of the earth. In Stephen Covey's 4-grid time management matrix, time is broken into 4 different areas rather than 3 different areas, and it's done in a matrix fashion. The matrix in this particular case has 4 quadrants, and for whatever reason, I have no idea why, quadrants are always labeled with Roman numerals. What I would do in Stephen Covey's 4-grid time management matrix, I would write what I was doing throughout the day in one of these 4 quadrants. And I put it in the quadrant according to the qualities that that particular activity has. Eating, sleeping, going to school, going to work, whatever it is, I would write it into one of these quadrants according to its qualities. And there are 4 qualities in Stephen Covey's 4-grid time management matrix. The first quality is the quality of being urgent. So anything that I would write over here on the left-hand side in either quadrant 1 or quadrant 3 has a quality of being urgent. The next quality is being not urgent. So anything that I would write over here in quadrants 2 or quadrant 4 are things that are not urgent. The third quality is being important. Anything that I write across the top that I'm doing throughout the day that's important, I would put in either quadrant 1 or quadrant 2. And anything I put in quadrant 3 or quadrant 4 are things that are not important. Now, things in quadrant 1 have the qualities of being both urgent and important. So if whatever I put over here in quadrant 1 is something that is both urgent and important, and that would be our crisis quadrant. Now, not everything here is a crisis, but enough up here is a crisis that we call this a crisis quadrant. You know, your boss walks into your office and says, you know, we need to do this right now. Just by your boss coming into your office, she made it important, and when she says we, she means you. She made it urgent. You have to do this, and you have to do this right now. Down in quadrant 3, they have whatever you write in there has the qualities of being urgent but not important. This is our interruptions quadrant. Things over here are, not everything's an interruption, but enough's an interruption that we're simply going to call this our interruptions quadrant. You're sitting at the dining room table, you're having a nice family meal, and the telephone rings. Just that ringing telephone makes it urgent. You got to answer it. But then when you pick it up to answer that phone, you find out it's somebody trying to sell you a new credit card or something. It's simply not important. Items in quadrant 4 have the qualities of being neither urgent nor are they important. This is our time-wasting quadrant. Watching TV, playing video games, you know, all sorts of stuff in there for our time wasters. And we all have our favorite time wasters. Items in quadrant 2, they have the qualities of being important, but they're not urgent. This is our planning section. Up here in quadrant 2 is planning. It's important that you plan, but it's not so particularly urgent that you plan. Also up here is something called sharpening the saw. Sharpening the saw is a metaphorical name. The metaphor is you're out in your backyard, you're cutting wood with a handsaw. Just cutting that wood away. As long as that saw stays sharp, you can cut quite a bit of wood in a short amount of time. But the more wood you cut, the duller that saw becomes. And as the saw becomes duller, it takes you more time and more energy to cut that same amount of wood. But if you were to take some time out on a regular basis and sharpen that saw, you can keep cutting the same amount of wood at the same amount of time with the same amount of energy. And in this metaphor, you are the saw. It's taken time out to sharpen who you are, to sharpen your skills, to sharpen your talents, to sharpen your abilities, to make you more employable, to make you a better parent, to make you a better spouse, all sorts of stuff to sharpen who you are. Also up here is recreation. You know, one of our motivational strategies was to stay physically and mentally fit. Here it's actually to plan time in for recreation. and our values are in quadrant 2. It's important that we work on our values. It's not necessarily urgent that we work on our values. And this is planning time in. In this particular paradigm, if you don't plan for it, you don't value it. If you haven't planned time in to spend with your spouse, then you don't value your spouse. If you haven't planned time in to spend with your children, then you do not value your children. If you haven't planned time to work on your relationship, then you don't value your relationship. So in this aspect is to plan time in for your values. Now, the three-part time management system had two main flaws. The first flaw was that it did not incorporate your value system. Right away, Stephen Covey incorporates the value system simply by putting the values into quadrant 2. So we plan time in for those things we value. But as it stands right now, it's just a description. It was one of the flaws that the three-part system had. So Stephen Covey added a process. And that process is that you want to move as much as possible into quadrant 2, up into the planning quadrant. In this matrix, that large outside box always stays the same size. If you superimpose this box over your 24-hour day, then that large box represents 24 hours. There's 24 hours inside that box. If you put it over your 8-hour day, then that box represents 8 hours. So that outside box never stays the same, or never changes. Because of that, anytime one of the quadrants on the inside gets larger, the others have to get smaller. And our goal is to make quadrant 2 the largest quadrant in there. And we can move things around, and things do move around. Now, one of the best ways for sharpening the saw is through reading. You know, read in your field, read outside of your field. There's lots and lots of benefits to reading. So that's a great way to sharpen your saw. However, if you spend too much time reading, like for example if you're using reading to procrastinate other activities, then it falls down into time wasting. You can move stuff from time wasting up into planning. You know, you have that television show that you just can't miss. You can't live without that television show. For me, it's Doctor Who. When Doctor Who comes on, I am sitting in front of that TV set. Move something from time wasting up into the planning section by plan that in. Plan in an hour of TV every now and then. You know, don't plan in 8 hours of TV, but plan in an hour of TV every so often. We're going to talk about tools for controlling interruptions later on, probably in another video. In crisis, you know, every time you have a crisis, if you start working on a plan for it, you can start moving things from crisis over to planning. The first time you deal with an irate customer, it's a crisis. But after you've dealt with 5 or 6 different irate customers, you start creating a fairly good plan for them, and now they're more of an annoyance than they are a crisis. And you start moving things around. And things can move from planning over to crisis too. You know, suppose that you set your alarm clock to get up just enough time to get ready to go to school or go to work, and over the night the power went out, and you wake up 5 minutes before you have to be there. Now your plan suddenly falls apart and it becomes a crisis. This is Stephen Covey's 4-grid time management matrix. Now when it comes time to recall this, and it will come time to recall this, if you can memorize that quadrant 1, our crisis quadrant, has the qualities of being both urgent and important, and quadrant 4, our time-wasting quadrant, has the qualities of being neither important nor urgent, you'll be able to get all of these quadrants in the right order with their appropriate qualities. Next video we're going to be doing is going to be talking about some time management strategies.